Alright, welcome back. We are going to be looking at our next activity from the materials kit, which is our convection activity. This one is really one of those opportunities for students to observe, and we want them to watch, observe, and then we want to see what they're thinking, because we're going to demonstrate convection, and we want them to see what they notice so we can then bring those concepts together. So let me talk about how to set this up, what you're going to need to have ahead of time. A couple things. One, you're going to have some room temperature water. So if your water at school's close to that, that's fine. If not, just get some water and have it setting out. You can do this in groups of 4. You can do one and demonstrate it for the whole class to see. It's really up to you, but we do have enough material so that kids can work in groups of 4, and we do suggest that because once you see it, you'll see how cool it is for kids to get an up-close view. But they're also going to have a supply of hot water and cold water. Once again, we got ice cube trays. You got a hot pot, you got thermoses to keep it also have hot and cold water available. Each group is going to have 2 trays, or a couple trays, but 1 tray on the bottom and then 2 cups that are labeled cold and hot, C and H. What we're going to do is we're going to place another tray of water, room temperature water, on top of these trays, and then we're going to add some food coloring and see what happens to the water. So before we do that, let's talk about the hot and cold water. For the cold water, all you need to do is fill it up to the top. I always put an ice cube in this water because you want the water to be sticking up above the cup, because when you put the tray on top, you want to have the cold water coming in contact with the tray. For the hot water, we don't have to worry as much about that, so we just go ahead and fill up a hot water to the top, but it doesn't have to be touching. Okay, so that's how we have it set up. What we do is we pour 2 trays of room temperature water. You'll notice on the deli lid that there's a kind of a shoulder where the ridge is. You can go up just below that. It doesn't really matter. And then you're going to want to let these trays sit out for just a few minutes, because what we want to have is a table that's not being bumped. So the students are going to have to make sure that they're standing around a desk, but they don't want to be bumping the table because that's going to mess up the results. So after they've sat for a little bit, you want to go ahead and put one of the trays directly on top. And that water that spilled out was just from the cold water. So that's good. And what we're going to do first is we're going to put 3 drops of red food coloring right on top of the hot cup. We're going to do the same thing over here on this tray, with obviously there's no cups below it. And what we're going to do is ask the students to observe. So you can ask students if you want, hey, what do you think might happen? It's pretty much a guess at this point, but they might have some ideas that's worth sharing. So once the trays are set, go ahead and place that's hot, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh. And I just bumped the tray, which is something you don't want to do. And then do the same thing. Put 3 drops on the side that does not have the hot and cool water. So we'll let it go for a little bit, and I'll let it a chance to film it, and we'll talk in a little bit. Alright, so it's been a minute or so. Obviously, students can look for a longer period of time, but ask at this point and get them to write down or share all the things that they're noticing and things that they might be wondering about. Also compare it to the other one. So in both cases, we had red food coloring placed on the left side. The only thing different is this has hot water and cool water down below it. And ask the students to share what they've noticed, and they'll see the what appears to be the red dye, the red food coloring, moving outward, coming over to this side. You can see how it's obviously being moved around a lot more than the other one. One thing that's hard to see from the camera, but have your students do it, but try to look on the side, because you can get the side view where you actually see the food coloring go to the cold side, and then it goes down low. So students might not start noticing those things. But the key thing right here is just, well, we noticed one thing, that the food coloring dispersed a lot more than it did on the other tray. So we have the students write some things as some notebook prompts, and then we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna do the exact same thing again, but this time we're gonna put the food coloring on the cold side, and they need to think about what's gonna happen when we do that. Okay, so for the next part of the activity, the students just observe the red food coloring. Now we ask them to predict and describe what they think is gonna happen when we do the exact same thing, but this time we're gonna just use blue food coloring, a different color, but we're gonna put it on top of the cold cup. So again, pour your food coloring or your room temperature tray of water. Place it over your hot and cold water. You have to check and see if you need to supply the hot water. Typically it stays hot enough, but if you need to, you can always include some more. Let it stabilize a little bit from the moving over. And we're gonna do the same thing as before. We're gonna put 3 drops in our control tray, and we're gonna put 3 on top of the cold water. And if you get a 4th drop or so, it really doesn't matter. And again, allow the students several minutes to observe. Alright, so this has been going over a minute now. One of the neat things that students will notice on this one is how the food coloring migrates and seems like it appears to move toward the warm water, stays on the bottom, which you probably saw in that side view, and then once it gets over to the hot cup, you start seeing these kind of like little explosions of the food coloring going up. So this just, again, have students describe what they're noticing, and this is where you can start talking about when heat gets added to a system. In this case, in a liquid, things are moving around, and the heat's moving to other parts in the water, and that's happening through these things called convection currents. And when students start noticing the heat rises, as they know, same thing, the heat is pushing the water up, pushing it over. When it gets over to the cooler side, it seems to condense. Well, they wouldn't know that, but it does seem to fall and go toward the bottom, and we start to see these beautiful convection currents. So if kids start to notice these things and to think it's appropriate to start bringing in some of that terminology about what's happening. So at this point, we're going to do one more time, but this time we're going to, and before I do that, sorry, check the control one. This tray here is another good example of there's nothing added here, no heat or no cooling, and while the colors are moving, not nearly the same as in the other 2 that had the food coloring, so, or the hot and cold water. Just some more evidence that when you add heat or coolness, we're going to change things within the water. So next one we're going to do is we're going to put the tray on there again, just like we did this time. We're going to put red on top of the hot, blue on top of the cold, 3 drops at the exact same time. And this time students are supposed to fill out their supporting document and predict what they think is going to happen. When they put this dye in there, where do they think it's going to go, and what do they think it's going to do? Alright, so we're back to the last part. This is going to be the conclusion. We're going to put both colors in at the same time. Again, I did redo the hot and cold water. Make sure you have, before you do this, the kids have thoroughly explained what they think might happen. They've drawn some diagrams, and now we're going to go ahead and let her rip. So obviously we got a chance to see this, have students make comparisons to what they saw, to what they thought was going to happen. Get them to think about the heat, the energy. Anytime we add heat to a liquid or a gas, that heat is going to get dispersed and spread throughout the gas or that liquid. And the way that happens is through convection currents. And that's what we're seeing here with the heat rising and the cool water, the cool area of the gas or water take its place. And it's something that we see repeatedly in the ocean and under our feet and all around in the world of science. So hopefully you guys enjoy this demonstration.